El profesor Durlak ha sido uno de los coautores del primer metaanálisis sobre los efectos de los programas de educación emocional y social que se han publicado en el mundo. Un metaanálisis sobre 300 estudios que fue el primero que demostró empíricamente que los programas socioemocionales, de forma conjunta, de forma global, son efectivos. No solo benefician los aspectos personales y sociales, sino que también incrementan entre un 15 y un 20% el rendimiento académico de los alumnos. Esto es un gran argumento para poder incorporar como una visión más global los programas socioeducativos dentro del sistema educativo.
My presentation is going to focus on one critical kind of question. Can we develop in children the kinds of social and emotional skills that fall under this general rubric of social and emotional intelligence? Okay. And so I want to talk to you about the work that we have done in looking at this from a scientific perspective. I am going to be talking about constructs that fall into the general category of social and emotional learning. In general, what we talk about when we talk about social and emotional learning are the kinds of things we can do to help children, adolescents, or adults, okay, develop the fundamental skills for success in life. Okay. So it's certainly not only appropriate for children, it's appropriate for everyone. Some of these skills have to do with how to handle effectively and ethically things like ourselves, our feelings, our thoughts, our needs, our behaviors. Our relationships, how we get along with others. Our school or our work, meeting the developmental tasks and challenges that anyone would face depending upon their particular kind of situation. This is their outline, their general outline for social and emotional learning that sort of identifies skills in different areas for children. First of all, dealing with self-awareness, how aware our children are of themselves, their feelings, and their reactions. What about their awareness with regards to other people? Empathy, respect for others, the ability to take another person's perspective. Responsible decision-making. Throughout our lives, people are confronted with decisions that they need to make. Can they do this in a responsible and effective kind of way? Self-management, okay, and then relationship kinds of skills. The big question, okay, well, if children are able to gather these kinds of skills or develop these kinds of skills, you would expect them to be able to manage their emotions effectively, develop caring and concern for others. And I will go down the list here, and you will see different positive outcomes that should occur if kids can develop these kinds of skills. Positive relationship with others, make responsible decisions, handle challenging situations, do better in school. The issue here is all of the things that I mentioned are fantastic benefits. Who can go against those kinds of benefits? So the first question that comes up is, can children learn these kinds of life skills? The answer is a resounding yes. But we wanted to do a very careful kind of review. We wanted to provide very solid scientific evidence that will establish the credibility of SEL kinds of approaches for school children. So we did a review of all of the interventions that we could find that were conducted in school for kindergarten through high school age children, as long as it was a universal kind of intervention. If the intervention tried to develop one or more of those SEL skills that I had identified earlier. If there was a control group, okay, a comparison group so we could compare how the kids in the program did versus children who did not receive this kind of program. And then we did a meta-analysis. Some of you might be familiar with meta-analysis. It is a statistical approach that's used that tries to quantify how much change occurs through an intervention. And then the study had to be reported in English and appeared by December 2007. I'm not proficient in any other language in English And my proficiency in English is 50-50. We excluded interventions if it was primarily an academic program. Then there are all kinds of other programs, particularly in the United States, where kids participate in to prevent drugs, HIV/AIDS, promote physical development. We did not look at that kind of literature. Okay. We found 213 interventions that satisfied our criteria involving over 270,000 students. 1/3 of them appeared in 2000 or later. A lot of these studies are more recent. Okay, this is a more recent phenomenon, so a lot of this work is just coming out now. Most of these studies have not been reviewed by other people, again, because so many of them are new. 81% of them were published. We did also look for unpublished work. Most of them were conducted in the United States. We did find 13% of them that were conducted outside of the United States, fit our definition, and we did include them in our sample. And this gives you the breakdown in terms of how old the children were or what grades they were in school. More than half were done with elementary children, which in the United States basically ranges between K and 5. Taking a look at this literature, all of these different kinds of studies, what we did is we looked at the different outcomes that the studies reported. But they tended to fall into these kinds of categories. And this is how we divided them. And we wanted to look more specifically, not just does it work, but how do children change, if they do change, from these different kinds of interventions? In what ways do they change? One of the things we looked at was SEL skills. Then there was another category called positive attitudes, either towards school or towards self. Then we looked specifically at behaviors, okay? And behaviors fell in different areas. One category was specifically positive social behaviors. Then there were conduct problems as another possible outcome measure. And then what we call emotional distress were things like anxiety, depression, feelings of loneliness. And then we looked at academic performance as a separate category, okay? So one of the issues is, in what areas do all of these studies find positive results when we pool all this information across all of these kinds of studies? Basically, a check mark means we got positive results in this outcome measure across all of these studies. So overall, there was a change in SEL skills from these interventions. Kids were able to learn skills. So that answers that first question, can children learn these kinds of skills? But that's probably not the only important question. That's so what? What are the children like otherwise? Okay, are there other benefits that come aside from learning these kinds of skills? Because the theory would suggest that there should be a positive impact on other aspects of the children's lives. Okay. And so we go through the list. We got a check mark for positive attitudes towards self and others. Kids change their attitudes about themselves and about school and education collectively across all of these interventions. So it was a positive change in attitudes. In behavioral adjustment, we got a positive effect in positive social behaviors. There was a reduction in conduct problems. Not only were the children responding better positively behaviorally, but there was a reduction in problems. There was also a reduction in emotional distress, again, across the board in all of these interventions together. And then finally, the big one is, yes, indeed, there was a positive change in academic performance as a result of these SEL interventions. So this is very heartening, okay? This does not say that every child benefited in every area, and it doesn't say how much each child benefits. So we're just talking about collective kinds of findings here. As a group, the children who are receiving these SEL interventions are doing better than the children in school who aren't receiving these interventions. SEL, social and emotional intelligence, is a great idea, but if someone wants to conduct a program or an intervention, okay, can they do that intervention to a sufficient degree? Can they do it the way it's intended? Does it have the kind, do they do all of the activities? There's a lot of research now that shows that a lot of things get started, a lot of programs get started, but there's a lot of problems that are encountered along the way. Some might need some assistance in doing it. So there's technical training, there's consultation, there's advice giving, there's problem solving. Another issue in implementation is that leadership is so important. If the principal at the school is not behind this program, okay, it could jeopardize how well the teachers do it. He or she might not provide the kind of support that is necessary. In terms of the things that we could identify in interventions, first of all, you need a sequence of training. It takes time for kids to learn these things. One very important principle that has come up in skills training literature is the importance of active learning. Kids need to act on the material. They need to practice the material. Focused. You need to devote enough time to this. Okay. You can't just squeeze a little bit in here or there. So you have to set some time aside in school to work on these kinds of things. And again, that means that you have to find the time, okay, make time for this kind of program in the schools. And then lastly, you need to be very explicit in what you're doing. What are the children supposed to learn? What exactly do you expect from them? How would they know if they're doing what they're supposed to do or doing what is expected? So the more explicit things. So what we did is we went through the reports that we found to see if we could identify those programs that were following these 4 practices. So then we went back through our outcome measures again, okay, and we looked and see whether or not our guesses or our ideas about what would work better would pan out. So we divided our programs, our safe programs that followed all 4 of those skills training practices, and put all of the programs in that category. And then we had other programs that didn't do all 4 of those kinds of things. And then we went through our outcomes to look to see whether or not there's a difference between those 2 groups of programs. And here are the check marks we got for the safe programs. So if the programs were following all 4 of those practices, they got positive results in all of the outcome measures that we were looking at. If they didn't, they got positive results in only 3 of those outcome measures. So it's not that they weren't successful at all, but there was the suggestion that following safe practices is associated with getting better results. The next thing we looked at was this business about implementation. If you're introducing some new kind of curriculum, the teachers need to be prepared on how to do it. They need to have some ongoing consultation, some problem solving. One of the general rules that comes up in this kind of research is assume there's going to be some problems and try and prepare for them. What we found was if there weren't any implementation problems, positive outcomes across the board again in all of these outcome measures. Okay. If there were some implementation problems, positive outcomes in only 2 of the areas. Again, the suggestion that implementation, how well you do the program. Here is just a list of things that we considered. Okay, we had randomized designs in our review, and we had some quasi-experimental research. Okay, we had some problems where there was very little attrition over time. In other cases, they didn't collect data from all of the participants at post. They lost some over time. We looked at the quality outcome measures. We looked at a very important issue. Who did the intervention? Some of these interventions are done in the schools by the regular school staff. We were very interested in knowing, can the regular school staff do this, or do you need a research team to come in with a lot of support and a lot of different resources to do the kind of intervention? And then we looked at duration. We looked at age of student. Does it make any difference when you do this? Do older students benefit as much as younger students or vice versa? That would be an important question. And then we also looked at the locale of the school. So when we did analyses for these kinds of variables, they did not make a difference on these kinds of outcome measures. So the major conclusions. Students can learn these skills. There's a lot of programs. And again, many other programs or other programs we did not include, okay, some of which are being discussed here at the Congress that focus on this kind of area. Not only do kids learn SEL skills, but they learn other kinds of things that are important. There are other outcomes that are associated with these interventions that seem to tie into an enhanced development for children. The practices are important. Adequate implementation is important. Putting findings in context, I do have a few more minutes. I'm going to quickly compare our results to what other people have found on these same kinds of outcome measures, but for different kinds of interventions. And to do that, I want to talk about, actually, we have done 3 different reviews. The first one I've just talked about, universal school-based interventions. We also did a separate review on what's called indicated school-based programs. Okay. Indicated prevention, meaning that these kinds of interventions are for children who are starting to have problems in school. And we've also done a review on after-school programs. These are programs that operate when school is done, usually from about 3 o'clock to maybe 6 or 7 o'clock during the day. They're usually open multiple days during the week, if not every day during the week. And they are a place for kids to come after school. They participate in different kinds of activities. Some might be academic activities. There might be social activities. There might be cultural activities. There might be a variety of kinds of things. In our review, we looked at after-school programs that had some sort of SEL component to them. So I'm going to be talking about the results of these programs compared to what other people have found. And the first slide shows you how the results of our program compare with the kinds of similar outcomes that other people have found for other kinds of programs. Now, we're not saying that SEL programs are better. The idea here is to, again, to sort of put things in context, okay? SEL programs, our results are in gold or yellowish. The results for other kinds of reviews are in blue. And you can see the way they compare. Okay. So in our review of the universal interventions, the changes that are found in children, okay, are very comparable to what other people are reporting for other kinds of interventions. And there's a whole bunch of other kinds of interventions that are compared. So it's not really trying to compare how good the program is, but really to just illustrate that SEL programs can achieve results on outcomes that are comparable to results that other people have reported for other kinds of outcomes. For our indicated review, it was hard to find other reviews that had outcomes similar to ours. There were only a couple of comparisons that we could make. In both cases, the results that we got in our review in gold compare very well to what other people have found. In terms of our after-school programs, again, there are some comparisons we can make across different kinds of outcomes. And so again, the after-school programs, all these SEL programs seem to be getting some good results. Now, a very important question is it really the skills that produces the outcomes? The skills really mediate and drive the outcomes. There's not a lot of research to demonstrate that. This is an area for future focus. What skills should we promote in children? At what ages? Okay. And so really, what outcomes are we interested in? Okay. For which kinds of children? What ages? At what time should we introduce these programs? And for how long are the effects? Implications for policy and practice. We think that educational policy should promote the use and the evaluation of SEL programs. That this is a legitimate focus for education. It needs to be given a chance. It needs to be carefully evaluated. And educational policies should allow for that. SEL intervention should be integrated into the educational curriculum. Get it in there, make it part of normal schooling. And then you need effective development programs for school staff. One of the findings that I didn't mention is that when we compared the interventions done by teachers and by researchers, the teachers actually did a better job. They got better outcomes on several areas, which is very encouraging, meaning this is a very practical kind of approach that can work in schools if it's well done. Teachers can do it if they understand it, if they're behind it and they want to do it. I want to thank you for your attention. I hope that I have stimulated you. I hope that I have told you that SEL has some scientific credibility. That's the major purpose, the major message I wanted to give to you today.